There is someone in your life right now, or in your past, who you could never quite fully reach, and the harder they were to reach, the more you wanted to reach them, the more you needed to reach them. They ran hot and cold, present one day and completely distant the next, without any explanation at all. And instead of walking away, something in you leaned further in, tried harder, gave more, waited longer. Meanwhile, someone else was right there, available, warm, consistent, genuinely interested in you from the beginning. And that person felt fine, nice even, but not exciting, not magnetic, not the one your thoughts kept returning to. So you stayed with the one who kept you guessing, and you told yourself it was because the connection was deeper, that the difficulty meant something, that the intensity was proof of something real that the easy option lacked. If that story sounds familiar, this video is going to explain something that might be uncomfortable to hear. Today we are talking about why emotionally unavailable people are so powerfully and specifically attractive, and why this attraction is not about chemistry or fate or finding your person. It is about something much older. Let's start with the neuroscience, because what happens in the brain during this kind of attraction is fascinating. When someone is inconsistent with their attention and affection, the brain enters a very specific state. It begins producing dopamine, not in response to receiving affection, but in anticipation of possibly receiving it. And anticipation, dopamine, is significantly more powerful than reward dopamine, more addictive, more consuming. Researchers call this intermittent reinforcement, and it is the most psychologically compelling reward schedule known. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling so difficult to stop. The unpredictability is what drives the compulsion. A slot machine that paid out every single time would lose its appeal almost immediately. The uncertainty is the hook, and an emotionally unavailable person is essentially a human slot machine delivering the same neurological experience. Sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes present, sometimes gone, and the brain cannot stop pulling the lever. Because maybe this time, maybe today, maybe if I just say the right thing, or do the right thing, or wait long enough. And every occasional moment of warmth from that person feels more meaningful than consistent warmth ever could. Because scarcity creates value, in economics, in resources, and devastatingly and completely, in human connection. Now let's talk about why this neurological pattern hits some people so much harder than it hits others. Because not everyone falls equally hard for emotionally unavailable partners. The pull is not universal in its intensity. The people who feel it most powerfully are almost always the people for whom inconsistent love was the original love. A parent who was sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes present and sometimes completely somewhere else entirely. A caregiver whose affection had to be earned through performance and could be withdrawn without warning at any time. A home where love existed but came with conditions that changed and could never be fully predicted or relied upon. And the child in that environment learned something that the adult is still acting on without knowing it. Love feels like this. Love requires effort. Love is something you pursue and earn, rather than simply receive. When love was given freely without effort, it did not compute. It did not match the blueprint. It felt off somehow. But when love had to be chased, earned, waited for, and occasionally won, that felt exactly like what love is. Psychologists call this a traumatic bonding pattern. The brain associates love with the effort required to obtain it. And then an emotionally unavailable person arrives and activates every single element of that original blueprint. The uncertainty, the need to earn, the hot and cold, the wondering, the occasional reward for sustained effort. And the brain says, yes, this is familiar. This is what love has always looked like. This must be the real thing. Let's talk about what specifically makes emotionally unavailable people feel so compelling beyond just the neuroscience. The first thing is mystery, and mystery is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology when it comes to attraction. When someone is fully open, fully available, fully readable, the brain quickly builds a complete picture of them. And once the picture is complete, the curiosity that drove the initial attraction begins to naturally quiet down. But when someone is emotionally unavailable, the picture never completes. There are always gaps, always unknowns. And the brain, which is fundamentally a pattern completion machine, cannot let incomplete patterns rest. It keeps returning, keeps analyzing, keeps trying to solve the puzzle of this person who will not fully be known. The second thing is the illusion of depth. Emotional unavailability is very easily mistaken for emotional complexity. A person who does not share much appears to have much worth protecting, much worth discovering beneath the surface. The silence reads as depth. The distance reads as interiority. The withholding reads as something profound being held, when very often the withholding is simply withholding, not depth, not complexity, just unavailability, dressed up as mystery. The third thing is the chase itself, and this is the most important one to understand clearly and completely. Human beings are wired to value things that require effort more than things that are freely and easily given. Psychologists call this effort justification. The harder we work for something, the more we decide it must be worth having. So the more effort an emotionally unavailable person requires, the more valuable the eventual connection appears to be. The brain builds an entire case for why this relationship is special, based on the suffering invested in pursuing it. And walking away from that investment feels like losing everything that was paid in. Not just the person, the cost too. Let's talk about what this pattern actually does to a person over the course of the relationship in real time. In the beginning, there is intensity. The uncertainty produces a state of heightened emotional and physical alertness. Everything feels more vivid. Every interaction carries enormous weight because the next one is never guaranteed. And that vividness gets misread as connection, as chemistry, as something rare and worth protecting at any cost. But over time, something else begins to happen, beneath the intensity that is harder to see from inside it. The person pursuing begins to shrink themselves, to become smaller, quieter, more accommodating, more careful. They stop expressing needs that might push the unavailable person further away. They manage their own feelings alone. They become the emotionally available one, in a relationship with someone who cannot or will not meet them there. And in doing so, they create the most painful dynamic possible, being fully present with someone who is largely absent. Now let's talk about the available person, the one who got passed over for the emotionally unavailable one. They feel boring by comparison, too easy, too present, too straightforward in their affection and interest. And that perception is not about them at all. It is entirely about the nervous system doing the perceiving. A nervous system calibrated for the dopamine of uncertainty will always experience consistent warmth as understimulating. It is not a reflection of the available person's worth. It is a reflection of the perceiver's unhealed blueprint. The available person is not boring. They are simply not triggering the familiar anxiety that gets mistaken for passion. And that distinction is one of the most important things a person can learn about their own patterns in love. Here is the question that begins to change everything when someone finally asks it honestly and sits with the answer. Am I attracted to this person? Or am I attracted to the feeling of trying to win someone who won't fully let me in? Because those two things can feel identical from the inside, but they lead to completely different destinations. One leads to a relationship, the other leads to an obsession, dressed up as a relationship, and the difference matters. Healing this pattern does not begin with finding an available person and forcing yourself to be attracted to them. It begins with understanding that the calm you feel around available people is not absence of feeling. It is safety. And safety, for someone whose nervous system was trained on unpredictability, feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable at first. But discomfort and wrong are not the same thing, and familiar and right are not the same thing either. The goal is not to stop feeling the pull toward unavailability overnight. That pull was years in the making. The goal is to start recognizing it for what it actually is, not love finding you, just an old wound looking for a familiar place to land. Subscribe if this finally explained a pattern you could feel but never quite name before.